My name's Emily Carter, and I was 34 years old the morning I walked out of the county courthouse with a signed divorce decree in one hand and a folder labeled confidential in the other. Before I even reached my car, I called my father. "Don't approve another payment," I said before he could even say hello. "Freeze every account connected to the Westbridge expansion project. And don't let anyone leave the building until I get there." There was a long silence. Then my father asked the question I had been waiting 3 years to answer. "You finally have proof, don't you?" "I have everything." 2 hours later, security locked the front gates of Carter Industrial Solutions, and 23 employees, who thought they were untouchable, suddenly found themselves unable to badge into the building. None of them knew that the woman they had spent years underestimating had just destroyed the plan my mother-in-law had spent nearly a decade building. Looking back now, I should have recognized the warning signs much earlier. My father, Richard Carter, started Carter Industrial Solutions in 1992 with one welding truck, a rented garage, and more determination than money. Over 30 years, he turned that tiny operation into one of the largest industrial equipment manufacturers in the Midwest. He never inherited a dollar. He earned every contract. Every machine on our factory floor represented another late night, another sacrifice, another promise kept. When I turned 30, he transferred 30% ownership of the company into my name. "This isn't a gift," he told me. "It's a responsibility. One day, this company will be yours to protect." I promised him I'd never let anyone take advantage of what he had built. I meant every word. Then I married Ethan Brooks. At first, his family seemed warm and welcoming. His mother, Linda Brooks, was the kind of woman who never raised her voice. She smiled constantly, remembered everyone's birthdays, baked homemade pies for every family gathering, and somehow always knew exactly what to say. Everyone called her generous. I eventually realized she was simply very good at making people lower their guard. During our honeymoon, she joked that our two families had become one business family now. I laughed. My father laughed. Neither of us understood that she wasn't joking. It started with a simple request. Linda asked whether her nephew, Kyle, could interview for an open warehouse supervisor position. "He just needs someone to believe in him," she said with a sympathetic smile. Kyle's resume looked respectable. His references checked out. He got the job. 3 months later, Linda mentioned another relative who had years of accounting experience, then a cousin looking for work in purchasing, then her brother's daughter who specialized in human resources. Every request sounded completely reasonable on its own. Every hire passed background checks. Every interview appeared legitimate. Whenever I hesitated, Ethan would squeeze my hand and quietly remind me, "They're family, Emily. Helping family is what good people do." I wanted to believe him. So did my father. Within 4 years, members of the Brooks family weren't just working at Carter Industrial Solutions. They were quietly occupying positions in payroll, purchasing, inventory control, accounts payable, logistics, and vendor management. At the time, I thought we were building stronger family ties. I had no idea we were handing over the keys to my father's company one department at a time. And the first clue that something was terribly wrong arrived in the form of a single invoice that should never have existed. Writing. The invoice landed on my desk late on a rainy Thursday afternoon. At first glance, it looked ordinary. A routine payment request for nearly $86,000 from a transportation company called Northridge Logistics. We processed hundreds of invoices every week, and nothing about the paperwork immediately stood out. Until I noticed the address. I had driven past that industrial park dozens of times. There wasn't a warehouse there, only an abandoned storage lot surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence. I assumed it was a clerical error. I asked our accounts payable manager to verify the vendor information before releasing the payment. She smiled politely and said she'd handle it. The next morning, the invoice had disappeared from my desk. So had the payment hold. When I checked the accounting system, the money had already been transferred. Someone had overridden my authorization. That had never happened before. When I asked who approved it, nobody gave me a straight answer. "It's already been taken care of," they said. Those 6 words became strangely common over the next several months. Every question I asked seemed to end with the same answer. "It's already been taken care of." At first, I convinced myself I was overthinking things. After all, business was booming. Revenue was climbing. We were winning major contracts. My father trusted our department heads completely, and I trusted my husband, or at least I wanted to. One evening, while Ethan and I were eating dinner, I casually mentioned the missing invoice. "I've noticed some unusual payments lately," I said. "Have you ever heard of Northridge Logistics?" He didn't even look up from his plate. "They've been handling overflow shipments for months." "That's strange," I replied. "Operations never mentioned adding another logistics partner." He sighed. "Emily, not every little decision has to go through you. I know, I just don't like payments being approved without authorization." He leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You spend too much time looking for problems." The conversation ended there, but something about his reaction stayed with me. It wasn't what he said, and was how quickly he wanted the subject to disappear. Over the next year, little things began piling up. Vendor prices suddenly increased. Even though steel costs across the industry were falling, inventory reports never seemed to match the physical stock in our warehouses. Purchase orders were approved in minutes instead of days. Employees who questioned unusual transactions quietly resigned within weeks. Every explanation sounded reasonable. Every individual incident seemed too small to justify sounding an alarm, but together, they painted a picture I couldn't ignore. One Friday evening, after everyone had gone home, I walked through the accounting department to collect a file I'd forgotten. A printer had been left running. Several pages were sitting in the output tray. I wasn't trying to snoop, but one company name caught my attention. Northridge Logistics. Again, this time attached to 3 different payments made on the same day. Nearly 24万美元. I compared the signatures. Every approval came from different departments, but the handwriting authorizing the emergency release looked almost identical. I quietly slipped copies into my briefcase before turning off the office lights. That weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about them. On Monday morning, I decided to speak with my father. Before I could reach his office, Linda Brooks appeared outside my door carrying 2 cups of coffee. She smiled the way she always did. "So?" she said warmly. "I hear you've been asking a lot of questions lately." My heart skipped. I hadn't told anyone, not even Ethan. How did she know? She placed 1 cup on my desk and gently patted my shoulder. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "sometimes it's better not to dig too deeply. You might find something that destroys your peace." Then she walked away as if she'd simply stopped by to say good morning. I stood there frozen. It wasn't advice. It was a warning. That afternoon, instead of talking to my father, I called a forensic accountant from another city, and I asked her one question. If someone had been stealing from a company for years, without anyone noticing, could you prove it? The forensic accountant introduced herself as Rachel Morgan. She had spent nearly 15 years investigating corporate fraud, and during our first meeting, she listened far more than she spoke. When I finished explaining everything, she closed her notebook and looked directly at me. "Emily," she said quietly, "if your instincts are right, someone inside your company already knows you're asking questions." That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Rachel insisted that every meeting remain completely confidential. We never met near my office or my home. Sometimes we met in the corner of a bookstore cafe nearly an hour away. Other times we sat inside her car in different parking lots, reviewing documents one folder at a time. The deeper we looked, the stranger everything became. Northridge Logistics wasn't a legitimate shipping company. It existed mostly on paper. Its office address belonged to an abandoned storage yard. Its listed phone number forwarded to a disposable mobile phone. And every payment eventually flowed through a network of companies that all pointed back to the same 3 people. Kyle, Linda's brother Victor, and a business trust managed by Linda Brooks herself. It wasn't just one fake company. It was an entire financial pipeline. Rachel estimated that we had only uncovered a fraction of it. For the next 8 months, I lived 2 completely different lives. During the day, I smiled through executive meetings, approved budgets, and attended family dinners where Linda asked about my health as if she genuinely cared. At night, I sorted bank statements, vendor contracts, payroll records, and property filings until my eyes burned. Every document uncovered another lie. Employees hired without proper interviews, contracts awarded without competitive bids, bonus payments approved for people who hadn't worked a full year. One afternoon, Rachel spread dozens of printed charts across the conference table in her office. Then she circled several names with a red marker. "There they are," she said. I counted them twice. 24, 25, 26, 27 employees, every single one connected to Linda's family either by blood, marriage, or longtime business partnerships. Some worked in payroll. Others controlled purchasing. A few handled inventory. Several approved vendor contracts. Together, they touched almost every dollar entering or leaving my father's company. Rachel leaned back. "This wasn't random hiring," she said. "It was an organized takeover." When she calculated the financial damage, neither of us spoke for several minutes. Over 7 years, more than $5.80 million had quietly disappeared through inflated contracts, fake consulting fees, phantom transportation costs, and companies that existed only to receive Carter Industrial's money before transferring it somewhere else. I felt physically sick, not because of the money, because every family holiday, every birthday, every Thanksgiving dinner, I had smiled across the table at people who already knew exactly what they were doing. That evening I confronted Ethan. I didn't accuse him. I simply placed one invoice in front of him. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Did you know?" His face turned pale. For nearly a minute, he stared at the paper without saying a word. Finally, he pushed it back toward me. "I think you're making a terrible mistake. That's not what I asked. They're my family, and I'm your wife." Silence. I realized then that he had made his choice long before I asked the question. He never denied the fraud. He never acted surprised. He only asked me to stop investigating. "Emily," he said softly, "if you keep digging, this marriage won't survive." I looked at the man I'd loved for 9 years. Then I understood something that changed everything. It wasn't the investigation threatening our marriage. The investigation had simply revealed that our marriage had been built on secrets from the very beginning. The next morning, I met with my attorney. I didn't tell my father. I didn't confront Linda. I didn't expose the report. Instead, I filed for divorce, and I made one promise to myself. I would say nothing until the judge signed the final decree. Because the moment I was legally free, no one would be able to accuse me of destroying my husband's family out of revenge. I would simply be protecting my father's company, and they would never see it coming. The judge signed the final divorce decree at 9:17 on a Tuesday morning. I thanked my attorney, picked up the sealed folder that had been sitting untouched in our office for nearly 6 months, and walked out into the bright summer sunlight. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's wife. I was simply Emily Carter. Before I even reached my car, I called my father. "Cancel every payment scheduled for today," I said. "Lock the accounting system, call corporate security, and don't let anyone leave the building until I get there." He didn't ask a single question. He simply replied, "I'm on my way." 45 minutes later, we sat together in the executive conference room. I slid Rachel Morgan's forensic report across the table. My father read in complete silence. Page after page, chart after chart, bank transfers, fake invoices, shell companies, employee connections. When he finally reached the last page, he slowly removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I trusted them," he whispered. "So did I." He looked at me for a long moment before pressing the intercom. "Call Human Resources, Corporate Security, and our legal department. Tell them to meet me immediately." Within the hour, 27 termination letters had been prepared. Security officers quietly escorted each employee from the building, collecting badges, laptops, and company phones. Some protested. Some cried. Some demanded lawyers. Others left without saying a word. By sunset, the network Linda Brooks had spent years building inside my father's company no longer existed. I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. That evening, just after dark, someone pounded on my front door so violently that my neighbor stepped onto his porch. I already knew who it was. Linda Brooks. The moment I opened the door, she pushed past me into the hallway. "How dare you?" she shouted. "You destroyed innocent families." I calmly closed the door behind her. "No, Linda." I stopped people who were stealing from mine. Her face turned bright red. "You have no proof." Without saying a word, I placed Rachel's report on the hallway table. She flipped through the first few pages. The confidence disappeared from her face almost instantly. "You hired an accountant." I hired someone who couldn't be manipulated. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, just as I expected, her anger transformed into something else. Desperation. "Emily," she said softly, "people made mistakes. We can fix this. Talk to Richard. Reinstate everyone. Ethan still loves you. We can't put this behind us." I looked at the woman who had spent years treating my father's life's work like her family's personal bank account. There isn't an us anymore. The divorce is final. The terminations are final. And if you challenge either one in court, I gently tapped the report. This becomes public record. She stared at me. For the first time since I'd met her, she had absolutely nothing to say. She picked up her purse, walked to the door, and left without another word. That was the last time I ever saw her. Over the next several months, everything changed. Our legal team recovered millions through insurance claims, canceled fraudulent vendor contracts, and worked with regulators to shut down every shell company connected to the scheme. New department managers were hired based on experience instead of family connections. Vendor costs dropped. Productivity increased. Longtime clients, who had quietly started losing, confidence returned. With larger contracts than ever before, for the first time in years, every financial report reflected the truth instead of someone's manipulation. One evening, my father invited me to the original workshop where Carter Industrial Solutions had begun over 3 decades earlier. The old welding truck still sat inside, polished but untouched. He smiled as he handed me a small brass key. "I've carried this since 1992, he said. "It opens the front office." I looked at him, confused. He smiled again. "It belongs to the company's next president." A week later, every employee gathered on the factory floor, standing in front of the people who had helped build the company. Honestly, my father announced his retirement as president. Then he introduced me as his successor. The room erupted in applause. As I looked across the factory, I realized something that had taken me years to understand. Protecting the people you love sometimes means walking away from the people who never truly loved you. I had lost a marriage, but I had saved my father's legacy. And unlike the family that tried to steal it, everything I now owned had been earned. If there's one lesson this experience taught me, it's this: never confuse shared last names with shared values, because the most dangerous people aren't always strangers. Sometimes they sit beside you at the family dinner table, smiling while they quietly empty your future. And the day they realize they've lost everything is the day you finally get your life back.